Monday mornings with Matt and Kevin. Topics that come up around the dinner table will be given the truth treatment with no punches held and no falsehood left standing.
There's so much to talk about, so let's get down to business. Here are Matt and Kevin.
This is Matt and Kevin on a Monday morning. Thank you all so very much for joining us, and thanks for, being patient with us when we missed a week. I was on vacation, visiting some family of my wife over on the west side of Germany. It was very nice, kind of a quick trip, a lot of driving, but it's nice. It's always nice to get over there and see the family and to spend time with our older folks. I think that's something that really struck me this week when I got to spend time with her. Grandma especially, is that she's getting older and she's alone a lot, and that's really pretty striking. Something that I think we all need to think of a lot of more, and to go and visit our relatives, because I think so many of them are not visited enough. They have all day to themselves, and I think it's even kind of tragic. So I think, please, if I can tell you anything this week that's of value, go and visit your grandparents, your parents, anyone who is elderly. Go and spend some time with them and tell them that you love them. And so, Matt, today we're going to start the show talking about homeschooling, which I think is going to be really interesting. I was homeschooled until high school. You were never homeschooled. So we're going to kind of talk about, the differences that we both experienced in schooling. Then we're going to go to you for a 15 minutes expose of the R&R, I suppose, or a bit of your thoughts on some of the things going on with the Novus Ordo and with the Recognize and Resist group. And then we're going to finish off the show with a bit of a discussion about the November elections, kind of talk about where we think that's headed. I'm obviously over here in Germany, so I don't know what's going on, but Matt, what's up?
You might be better off. Yeah. Actually, it's funny that you were talking about vacations, because I was just thinking back on my grandparents as well. So it's kind of cool that you brought that up. And when I was younger, my grandparents passed. They got sick when I was on the younger side, so I didn't have much quality time with them. And when I did, I kind of just took it for granted. We went over grandma's house, grandparents' house, and we had food and we watched sports and we played cards and all those fun things. But I wish now that I got older that I got to talk with them more. Like they kind of grew up in the Depression, World War. They got married in 44, my grandparents, on my father's side anyway. So I'm like, man, I wish I could take advantage of the time now, and talk with them and hear what they have to say. And, my grandpa, I don't think he graduated, fifth grade or so. Wow. He had to work for his family, but brilliant, knew everything. And it makes me think that generation is gone. And so, yeah, like you said, jump on the chance if you can to spend time with your family. But yeah, so homeschooling, right? The newest craze, I guess you can call it, here in the US. I was just looking this morning, Kevin. They were showing that from the 90s to the 2010s or so, the level was pretty flat. We had about a 3% homeschooling population here in the US. Since COVID hit, the general population, now this is the entire US, it's different by state, but they were showing that we're around 11 to 12% now. That's a huge jump. Yeah, huge. In some states, as much as 17, 18, 19% increase in percentages, huge jumps. So I think there's a few aspects to kind of approach this with. I think because I was actually teaching when COVID hit, and one of the things they did, and I kind of was able to, examine this through a different lens, was we all went home. All the kids got laptops. They all went home. We worked on Google Classroom, which is a website Google uses to kind of, post assignments and grades and keep track of the kids. And you can video and you could do lessons, and it's kind of cool. And I think, the time was much, much less. We didn't sit at our computers here for the 8 or whatever hour school day. We would maybe get on around 9:30, 10 a.m., do a little class meeting for 20 minutes. The kids would break off and do their assignments. And then it was kind of really sporadic throughout the day. I want to say that my online time with them when I was still in the public school system, but doing COVID online learning, was probably about 2.5-ish hours a day, which dramatically changed everything. And, I think when I was doing that, I'm like, you know what? I can totally see how this can be far more effective, because one, kids are sleeping a lot later now, which was good. I saw results. I actually saw good things. You know, they did all these studies how kids are falling behind. You know, they're losing it, but there were absolutely pluses to this. Kids were sleeping later, which I think is important. They weren't, you know, getting on the bus at 6:30 a.m. at the age of 6. They were able to sleep in late, like I said, have a homemade breakfast if mom or dad or somebody was home, which it kind of worked out that there were. And just so many pluses. They got to eat lunch at home. A lot of the kids, they prepared their own lunch. I had some kids I remember being like, you know what, like after I would say, what are you doing when we finish up today? And they would say, yeah, my mom and I are making lunch today. That never happened. Obviously in public school, they're in a different building. So many positives. And I think a lot of parents were like, you know what, I like this. This is cool. This is nice. This is good. And it kind of pulled away, like, you know, sending off my kids. And we did have those types of parents who get my kid away from me, which is another topic for another day. But just so many benefits that I saw that really, like, even from me when I grew up in public school, I went to preschool in a public school, very different. So maybe if I can ask you quick and then I'll jump into my side, what were some highlights that you remember from being a kid and being homeschooled? Like, what was so great about it to you? Or maybe what did you not like? What was like, oh, I don't like this part?
Well, real quick, before I comment on that, I think I've got to mention
Yeah.
too that part of what happened,
Yeah.
why you had this 11% or, you know, the 9% increase or whatever it was, is not just the
Sure.
positives. Parents also saw that, as you said, you don't need as much time. You don't need 8 hours a day to learn what they're actually teaching you. You need about two and a
Yeah.
half or 3. That's, as you said, that's a really good point. And really, everyone listening, remember that point because it's extremely important. The other one was that they could see exactly what the schools were teaching them. And as we talked about in our last
Yes.
show, a lot of that is pure garbage. It's pure garbage. They are teaching them absolute trash, and they're teaching them falsehoods. They're teaching them, you know, that white people are evil at birth, etc. And
They are.
the kids brought that home, and the parents were like, "Holy cow, this is insane! I don't want my kids being taught this." And the parents never even knew it before because they didn't actually see what was being taught. And now they could actually watch over the kid's shoulder and see what was being taught, and they're like, "Wow, okay, we're homeschooling from now on." And I think that was a big part of it too. But back to your question,
Yeah.
it's a really good one because we lived out on a small farm, so we did a lot of work outside too, and that was one of the smartest decisions I think my parents ever made was to move out of the city and move out to a small farm. And we would get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning to go out and milk the goats, take care of the pigs, you know,
Oh.
feed the chickens, and then we'd go in and then we'd eat breakfast. And I think if we got up early enough, we could play 30 minutes on the computer. That was kind of the prize of getting up so early. And then we get to schoolwork,
Huh.
and then we'd be done by about noon, and then we could go outside and play, or we'd do chores and then we'd play. And so we had a really, you know, this lifestyle that was not a modern lifestyle in many ways. You know, we get outside and work, you know, really early. And at the time, obviously, there were days where I hated it. I mean, not kids don't want to get up that early and milk goats, but it really did teach all of us the value of work and the value of keeping things alive. You know, the value of growing and building and all these different things. And then, you know, for the actual schoolwork itself, up until a certain point, you know, my mom had 10 kids. And so she had at one time, let's see, before I went to high school, I think she must have had 6, no, maybe 7. So she would probably had 6 that she was teaching, and then a baby and a toddler or so. So she was quite the lady to be able to pull that off. And I think people think, okay, how is that even possible? But the big question that you mentioned is, you know, how do you get the time, you know, to be able to teach them? I don't have 8 hours a day to teach my kids. And then you don't have to have that much time. You know, you need to present a certain topic. You need to explain questions when they're asked. You know, if there's a problem, you need to explain it to them. But a lot of the time is spent with them reading the topic on their own and trying, you know, working through a subject matter or doing a quiz or doing a test. And a lot of that's spent on their own. And that's something that my mom figured out soon. And again, one of the biggest benefits of it was that my mom and my dad, they could see what our weaknesses were. They could see what our strengths were,
Yeah.
and they could specifically work to those weaknesses and strengths. And as your grandpa, you know, who you know dropped out at 5th grade, that was a great segue, by the way. You know, he still ended up being an extremely intelligent person, and it shows you, as Mark Twain said, never let your education get in the way of your learning. So the education part of it is not. It's not always that important. And I think it's a good way to send it over to you. And maybe you tell a bit about your experience going to school your entire childhood.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to jump in with something you were saying. So we
Totally.
did this thing. So most of school, I think what's funny is, they preach this stuff as gospel truth, and then they change their minds as to how kids really learn a million different times.
Sounds like medicine these days, huh?
Exactly like medicine. There was this thing, I'm going so off topic here, but I got to throw this on. There's this reading program, right? It's called Lucy Calkins, which is like, she's a literary guru. It's like, if you want to teach your kids how to read, how to write, how to do any of these things, Lucy Calkins, you literally buy her book and you read her script. She scripts your sentences for you as a teacher, or as a parent, or whatever, to teach you how to write, right? And this was like, if you don't do Lucy Calkins, you're like, you're third world moron over here. It turns out that after 20-ish years of there's no other way to learn, that maybe this didn't really work. And you had to sit there and listen to these things time and time and time again. But kind of what I wanted to jump in on, one of the points you were making, was the philosophy, I think, really, maybe, I don't know, it seems like it lasted a while, but maybe from the 50s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, up until the 90s, was you sit in your chair and you watch me do it on the blackboard, whiteboard, smartboard, whatever thing you have. And that was pretty much it. But like what you said was, there's no time to really do all that. So there's a lot of self-direction, right? Like, I got to pick up this book and learn it. And actually in the public school, especially with this COVID, everybody go home and all that sort of thing, distance learning, there was a lot of that self-direction, rather than, because we don't have a whiteboard anymore. We don't have these tools. So rather than you watch me, look at what's before you. What do you know? What skills do you have? And how can you work it out? How can you maybe, struggle through something, or how can you work through something? Because that was gone, it was just, feeding the minds, as they sat there. But I think there was a lot of hands-on stuff, which was good. But I remember, to your original question, being a kid, preschool, actually, which was like half day, maybe 8:30 to 11, or whatever small window it was. And I hated it. I remember crying. I would cry in the car ride there. I would actually get to school and I would cry, and the teacher there, whatever, had to comfort me. And it felt so unnatural for me to be there. 4 years old, right? Because preschool is 4 years old. So at that time, being away from your parents for 3 hours felt like, I was abandoned, for eternity. And sadly, that kind of stuck with me. I hated going to school. I remember for pre-K and kindergarten, so at the age of 4 or 5, I certainly shed some tears in the morning, not wanting to go and do this. I remember being in kindergarten one day, and whatever activity we were doing, I asked to go to the bathroom, and I went in there and I cried in the bathroom. And thinking back, it was like, wow, all these traumatic experiences. But I remember not liking school really until like 5th grade. So maybe about 10-ish years old. Every year, I liked some teachers more than others, but just the whole thing of being away from home, I wanted to play baseball with my dad. I wanted to, go over my grandma's house, and which I did these things as a child. I want to go over my grandma's house and make homemade pasta, and my mom takes me to the grocery store and we can get, I don't know, ice cream when we finish. Like, I wanted that. I didn't want to sit here and do these worksheets that they pounded in us, and listen to the teacher all day and sit and be quiet. That was really, really hard for me, because I loved being active. We would always go outside and play. We would go walk in the woods. We would make adventures. So for me to sit there as a kid, I remember being like torture. I couldn't. Very hard.
And let me ask you. I mean, I hear this all the time from kids in school, or from parents saying, my kid has ADD, or my boy has ADHD. I bet you ran across that a lot in school. And you want me to tell you what ADD is, folks? And I know you'll go to the doctor and they'll prescribe you something. I want to tell you what it is. It's putting a little boy who wants to run around outside into a desk for 8 hours a day. That's ADD. And it's unbelievable that our society doesn't understand this. That it's like, let's take boys and take out their entire nature and plop them down into a seat for the entire day. Come on.
I had 7-year-olds, Kevin, on medication for that in my school. Some a bit more a little fidgety than others, but I had 6, 7, 8-year-olds on drugs because they weren't sitting still or they weren't being quiet. I think I talked with you about this maybe a few episodes ago. Girls are infinitely better at schooling at young ages than the boys are. They like to be quiet. Yeah, they want to be quiet. They want to sit there and read and color. This is perfect for them. Turn off the lights, put a music on, let me take a book, and they loved it. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to go outside and tackle each other.
Right. When I was 6, I half thought I was a dinosaur at times. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, there's not.
Yeah.
Boys learn in a very different way. It's a very hands-on way. They need to learn by doing and by seeing and by feeling and by making mistakes and by scratching their knees and by, to a certain point, fighting. Now I know I got some guff last time I said that, but it's true that there is a certain point. Bullying, no, but a certain point of getting, that physicality is so necessary for boys. And people wonder, I wonder why our society is so stripped of their masculine men. Well, first of all, you got Hollywood that pounds that into their heads, and Disney that wants wants to get rid of that, wants to feminize everything. But it's also, well, if you go and teach boys and girls exactly the same thing in exactly the same way, do you really expect it to come out exactly how you want it? Of course it's not. You're feminizing boys from the very beginning.
Let me see. Yeah, let me see if I can find it really quick. Fulton Sheen commented on this, and Fulton Sheen, let me see how quickly I can search on Twitter. He said something along the lines of like, you shouldn't mix the two genders at that age, because the girls will become like boys in a lot of ways, and the boys will become like girls. Man, let me see if I can find it.
Well, and it's something too that even at I think at most ages in high school as well. I mean it's just something that it's not not how it's meant to be. You act differently too. You're trying to impress girls. That's kind of it built into us again. And that's not what you want. You should be with your peers. And again, of course, I'm not saying that boys shouldn't be learning. That's not my point. And I'm sure there's a certain amount that boys need to actually study, but it should not be 70% of the daylight hours. Absolutely not.
Right. And then on top of that, I can't really find it here. I found the video clip and not the actual quote. On top of that, then they got to go home and do homework. Right. So they're away from their family for what? From 7:30 in the morning to get the bus to 4 p.m. to come home, and now they're supposed to read for 20 minutes and do this math packet. It's completely destroying everything about us and who we are as people. And like you said too, you don't learn how to stand up for yourself anymore, because like you said, the bullying thing kind of got some pushback or whatever, but there was a sense of, okay, either I deal with this or I say something, I push back somehow, some way. And we've lost that big time. So I think,
well, and why do you think we have so many soy boys? We have so many soy boys now that they're wearing skinny jeans and stuff. Exactly. They've been coddled. They've been coddled by their teachers and by their mommies since they were 5 years old.
Medicated. I
mean, these poor guys, they never had a chance. They never had a chance to be manly. I mean, instead of watching John Wayne, these guys were watching, I don't know, Teletubbies. And it's a serious thing. I mean,
sure. It's true. I remember one of my kids in particular that I had in class sticks out a lot. When we would go outside at recess, and this was a kid, he couldn't sit still for 2 minutes. When we would go outside at recess, he actually didn't run around and play. And this used to baffle me. This was a kid who couldn't sit still for 2 seconds in his chair, on the carpet, whatever. He was guaranteed to be in a different spot within 30 seconds. But we would go outside, and I would think, like, oh, he's going to run around like a maniac. He actually didn't. He would sit there, believe it or not, and he would look at the grass, or he would want to play with dirt or see if he could dig up a salamander or a bug or whatever in the grass. And it made me think, like, he can sit still. Maybe he's overstimulated with all of this, because the rooms, they were supposed to be colorful and bright and kind of, like, if you want to use the word effeminate, but they're very geared towards women. Women decorate the rooms. They're all elementary school teachers and whatnot are women. And it's very stimulating. So I think for a lot of kids to go outside, it's quiet. I can feel the breeze, the smell the air, smell the trees, the grass, whatever, the flowers, and just kind of have a quiet spot too. I think there's a lot to say for all of it. There's a lot of aspects of it. And this homeschooling trend, I think, as you said, people really realize, hey, I don't need 8 hours a day for this stuff.
Well, and let me ask you this, and as a teacher, you're a really good one to ask. How much, so you taught 5th and 6th grade or so, right?
I did 5th, I did 4th, and I did 2nd.
Okay. So let's say 4th and 5th graders. How much, and it's a hard question to answer, but how much does a 4th and 5th grader have to learn? Like actually learn, like, you know what I mean? I mean, what do they actually have to know at 4th and 5th grade?
Yeah.
There's no solid answer, but you see my question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of the stuff is overkill. Really, really big overkill of do it a million times. It's like, why do it a million times if I can do it already? And that was a thing in math. So like division, multiplication, there's brand new ways to teach that and to learn that at that age. You have kids who knew how to do it. You know, I could solve a problem, and then they had to practice, 40 examples a night for a month. Like, why? I know how to do it already. What am I doing these things for? Writing was a lot of like opinions. How can I express my opinions? How can I defend my opinions? How can I back myself up? How can I develop sentences? And really, they would start to research a little bit more than they did at a younger age. At a younger age, it was very little research. It was more so opinion writing. Why, I don't know, why baseball is the best sport, or why, really giving your thoughts. But as they got a little bit older, they had to learn how to research a bit, which I think that was good. But reading, it was a lot of reading for information, reading for comprehension, which, I think it's just really dragged out. More than anything, math was most noticeable. I mean, even for me, I remember doing, what did we start with? We started with fractions in 5th grade. And I had kids, I would not know what to do, because I had kids who would on day 2 say, I got this, I can do this. They would do very well on their work. And I would say to myself, we have 2 weeks left of this curriculum. Well, it's overkill. Whereas if you're homeschooled, it's like, okay, Kevin's got it. Let's do something different. Or, but when you're locked in the public school, I don't care how good you are at it. I don't care how bad you are at it. This segment is 2 weeks, and that's it. Once it's November 14th, you can't teach fractions anymore. It was very scripted, so a lot less individual attention. And then things would repeat. They would go to the 6th grade, which was a new school, or come in from 4th grade or what have you, and things would kind of try to build on one another. But I had some kids who were just excellent writers, excellent researchers, and they loved doing it. They enjoyed writing. They loved looking up things. I remember having someone, she loved animals, so she would find pictures, and she would find articles about whales and dolphins and all of that, and she would make up her own. She would do it for fun, like outside of blocked time. She would do it for fun. These kids don't need like lessons on it. Like, she can do it already, and I think that is a lot less. It's a lot less focus on the individual child and a lot more just generic. Here it is, like, and there's no real differentiation, because I had one group of kids who were high and some kids who were very, very low. Very challenging.
And I think when you look at it, and I totally agree, and I think that's another benefit that as a homeschooler, I was really good at reading and writing, and I was terrible at math. So my mom would be like, okay, we need to work more on math. You can go read in your free time. So yeah, we just didn't even do it.
Yes.
So I mean, that just makes sense. But I think that, it's another really interesting topic that we'll have to talk about on another day, because we're already running late on this segment. But the classical education, when back in the day, before our modern education was kind of put into works, I don't know, 100 years ago or so, people used to learn theology and philosophy, as your primary skills.
Yeah.
And then you would learn kind of the arts and mathematics and science. But your primary, theology was primary, and then philosophy was secondary, because that was how you learned how to learn. And nowadays, they teach you facts, or supposed facts, and yet they teach you, okay, this expert says X, and so X is true, so remember X. Now, that's not back. Classical learning was, how do I learn? How do I understand the world? And how can I say, okay, this expert says X. Now, how do I find for myself if X is true or not? And that is not even remotely. People don't try to determine if something is true. They say, oh, Dr. Fauci says it's true. He's an expert, so it's true. Look what happened to our world. Our world is run by quote unquote experts who don't know what's going on. It's
like weathermen.
It's true. It's absurd.
It's 100% true. It's 100% true. And even stuff that is preached as gospel truth, like I said, with this Lucy Calkins was an example reading program, 20 years. They said phonics was no good. Phonics was big in the 80s, 70s. All of a sudden that was wrong. Don't do that anymore. And then now in 2021-ish or so, they're saying, you know what, hey, maybe that worked, looking at words and picking apart letter sounds and all of that. They don't know what they're doing. They really don't.
Well, and I think that's a lesson for our society is that try to
Politicians.
yeah, politicians, scientists, all these people learn how to think for yourself. Don't just learn, they say learning how to think, and they say, well, doing math and doing calculus is to help you to problem solve. Yeah, okay, that's true, but it's not to help you how to learn how to actually think and to critically think and
Right.
say, I wonder if this is true. Now, he says it's true. How do I determine if it is or if it isn't? And that is a lost art. Well, Matt, that was a really interesting segment. I appreciate you coming
Cool.
on with me to talk about it. Let's talk about or next. We're going to send it over to you for a segment to talk
Yes.
about the R&R, and I think you kind of delve into a couple different points of that topic, and then afterwards we'll go over and talk again about the November election. So stay tuned, everyone. Matt's up next.
Like what you hear? Be sure to subscribe to the Catholic Family Podcast.
We are Catholics, faithful to all of the teachings of Holy Mother Church. We believe that the chair of Peter has been vacant since the death of Pope Pius XII in 1958, and that the religion being promulgated upon us by the Vatican II Church is not the Catholic religion founded by Jesus Christ. Welcome aboard. I wanted to start off today by sharing with you all this new book that I just received. It's called Papal Error, a defense of popes said to have erred in the faith by Saint Robert Bellarmine, Doctor of the Church. This book is a must-have for any Catholic, especially since the antics of the Recognize and Resist camp have been on the uptick as of late, but we'll get to that in just a bit. Opening the book to its table of contents, you see a list of popes that have come into question throughout history. Liberius, Felix II, Innocent, Honorius, John the 22nd, and so on. Bellarmine briefly explains the error associated with the accused Roman pontiffs, and then provides a simple defense to prove that never has a pope been a heretic. And, this is such a great resource. It was a little over $10 on Amazon, so be sure to check it out. Again, it's called Papal Error, a defense of popes said to have erred in the faith. And the quote on the back cover, I have it here, is from Bellarmine himself, and I love this. It reads, "How, I ask, will a heretical pope confirm the brethren in faith, as well as always teach the faith? For to this point, no pope has ever been a heretic, or at least it cannot be proven that any of them were heretics. Therefore, it is a sign that such a thing cannot be." And Bellarmine is, of course, citing Luke 22:32, which reads, quote, "But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brethren." On one more note, I have finally picked up Father Cicada's book, Work of Human Hands, a theological critique of Mass of Paul VI. Surprised it took me so long to get this one, but I'm eager to dive into it and will certainly share some of the snippets from the book with you all soon. Anyways, the Recognize and Resist camp seem to be in full-blown attack mode as of late. A recent conference led by John Henry Weston and Michael Matt claims to have put the Supreme Pontiff on notice. That's right. A group of a few hundred like-minded people have officially declared their warning against the Supreme Judge of all the faithful, the man who has complete jurisdiction over every single Catholic in the world. Or, well, he would if he were, the actual Pope. Anyway, the group listed several interventions against Francis. The first being a complete and total resistance to Traditionis Custodes, the document issued by Francis on July 16th, 2021, where he formally teaches that the liturgy promulgated by Saint Paul VI, yeah, he had to throw that in there, is the only expression of the Roman Rite. The document actually reads, "I now desire, with this apostolic letter, to press on evermore in the constant search for ecclesial communion. Therefore, I have considered it appropriate to establish the following. The liturgical books promulgated by St. Paul VI and St. John Paul II, in conformity with the decrees of Vatican Council II, are the unique expression of the lex orandi of the Roman Rite." Now, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? I mean, how can the traditional Latin Mass, the faith of the saints, the lace and the incense and the bells and the chant, be the very same rite as Father Nice in his rainbow-colored chasuble cracking jokes in front of his wooden table? I mean, does the vast spectrum of expression look like the same religion to you? I mean, of course not. To Francis, or whatever extent, he realizes that there does need to be some sort of unity here. And if Paul VI was indeed a true pope, then folks, this stuff binds. The Novus Ordo Missae is the expression of the Roman Rite. If this is what the Roman pontiff decrees as a matter of discipline upon the universal church, then guess what? It's infallible. You can't resist it. In fact, Francis closes the document with the following statement. He says, "Everything that I have declared in this apostolic letter, I order to be observed in all its parts. Anything else to the contrary, notwithstanding." Ooh, doesn't sound, like something that anyone conscience could resist. Well, this is indeed a command from the Supreme Pontiff directed towards the universal church. If you want to host some press conference issuing a formal resistance of it, well, you've placed yourself into schism. This stuff isn't subjective. When you combat the commands of the Holy Father on such matters, you have pitted yourself against the Pope, the proximate rule of faith. We are a church of hierarchy, a church of obedience, whether we like it or not. In turn, we are guaranteed that everything promulgated upon us is entirely safe for our soul. Never can the church lead us astray. Never can she give harmful liturgy. The only conclusion one can even draw here is that the men doing such things are not lawful Catholic authorities. Otherwise, the papacy is subject to your personal private judgment of it all. And if that's the case, why not just be a Protestant? To briefly illustrate this point, Mr. Athanasius Schneider, one of those prominent guests at the Resistance Conference, said, "If we disobey Francis formally, then we obey the Church of all time." I mean, what does this even mean? The people who reject sedevacantism on the premise of having no living authority are telling you that in order to be a Catholic, you have to disobey the living authority in the church? I mean, is the Pope an obstacle to Catholicism for these people? Do they think that the surest way to be Catholic is to simply disobey the Pope and determine what the church really taught on their own accord? Or did Bellarmine not ask the question at the beginning of the program where he said, "How will a heretical Pope confirm the brethren in the faith?" It doesn't work like this. In fact, Pope Pius IX said that the Catholicity of each individual is up to the Holy See. to decide. Quote, "For any man to be able to prove his Catholic faith and affirm that he is truly a Catholic, he must be able to convince the Apostolic See of this." That's Pope Pius IX in his work Quartus Supra, number 8. If you want to know the true Catholic teaching on the papacy, you need to read what the popes actually taught on the subject, and not what Eric Sammons or Michael Matt have to say at their formal resistance events. Otherwise, you might just end up rethinking the papacy. You're listening to Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin on the Catholic Family Podcast.
And thank you, Matt, for that very nice segment. And thanks for coming back with me to talk about the November elections. And I don't follow this closely, honestly. I'm not really looking to what's going on, but I follow it kind of from a distance. I see what's going on a bit on Twitter. I mean, I see in Pennsylvania, you have a guy who just had a stroke and literally has lost his mind and is running for, I think it's Senate, and he's running against Dr. Oz, who's not much
Dr.
better.
Oz.
I think that's the Senate, or is it governor? I think it's Senate. And
Senate. That's for Senate. Right.
Fetterman, this guy, he's like Biden. He literally, and I feel sorry for the guy. The guy has literally lost portions of his brain to a stroke, and he's running for Senate.
Perfect.
Guys,
yeah, I don't want to make a joke, but perfect.
And you're like,
Democrat.
right, I was gonna say, right. So what's the difference here? They actually, the good thing is he may actually be an upgrade to your normal Democrats with a full brain. So thank you.
He might be.
Thank you for that. And so Matt, maybe I don't know where you want to begin. What are your feelings of what's going to happen? I keep hearing red wave, but is that actually going to happen?
So here's what I was thinking through all of this. So, I've been through several election cycles now. I remember, thinking way back when I was there was a time where I used to think that, like, if we only vote Republican, things will be okay. That was what I was really, I was kind of engulfed into that, the big time conservatives. Like, I was like, this is just, we got to rally behind these people and, go for the kill.
Paul Ryan is the best. Oh.
Paul Ryan, our way through that. Yeah. Ron Paul is interesting, but anyway.
He's
Ron Paul, a little different from the rest. But so I remember, like, you listen to these narratives, and I think to myself, how are people who are much older than me still falling for this stuff? The pattern. So I was just thinking back in my own life, right? Going backwards from elections as this, news cycles hit the mainstream media, and going back to, what did they tell us when it was, Trump Clinton? What did they tell us when it was Obama Romney? What did they tell us when it was Obama McCain? What did they tell us when it was Kerry Bush? Going all the way back. And I remember the pattern doesn't stop. It's a circle. So basically what happens is, and this just continues, a Democrat or a Republican, let's just go with Republican, wins the White House. They win Congress, both chambers. Everything is red. Then, 2 years later, it's not going so well. So then they vote in Democrats to take over Congress. So the House and the Senate, both chambers usually go blue. And then we've got a Republican president and a Democratic Congress. And then, people are a little bit more fed up. So then they put it all blue in the next election. So then we've got a Democrat, we got Obama and a Democrat Congress. And then, people get tired of that. And so the Republicans took over in 2014 or what have you. And now, so now there's a deadlock, between Republicans and Democrats. And then Trump won the White House, and then Republicans took all of Congress back. So, and then we had all red, and then a few years later, Pelosi comes out of her cave again, and Democrats become the winning party in Congress, and we've got a split, and now they're saying red wave again. This circle goes on, and nothing changes whatsoever. It's baffling to me that people literally fall for this, that people think like, if I vote for Republicans here, this is just my opinion, but if I vote for Republicans here, now we're going to deadlock Biden because this is what happened with Trump. This is what happened with Obama. This is what happened with Bush. The opposing party takes control of the legislative branch, and all of a sudden there's the deadlock, and then the next party wins in November, the White House. So nothing changes though. And so I think there's a red wave. Probably I do, because there is this discontent for who's ever in office. Nobody's ever happy. And then they vote for the opposing party, and then they get in, and then it's the same sort of rhetoric that you hear, and they campaign on these things that they all want to do, and then nothing happens. And to be honest, Democrats are a bit better, in my opinion, than Republicans at actually winning and putting into practice what they said they were going to do. Republicans really, really yeah, it's true.
You're true. You're right. I mean, it's terrible what they run on, but they do actually stand by it.
Planned Parenthood. Do you know how many Republicans got? Because local elections are a bit easier, right? Than saying president. Republicans locally ran on being really a pro-life party, defunding Planned Parenthood. All this rhetoric that kind of went around in local elections. If you are in a red, most states are red. You have your blue cities, but most states are you go to the towns and they're pretty deep red. So it's fairly easy to win. If you're a Republican and you are in the right spot in the country, pretty easy to win. They would campaign on defunding Planned Parenthood. We're going to overturn and then nothing happens. Every time a Republican, if I remember correctly, or Republicans took Congress, Planned Parenthood got more money. They were funded more than what they promised they would run on. Democrats, on the other hand, say we're going to do this and do that and codify and give money. And then they do so. They actually follow through. So I do think there will be a red wave. Will it be effective at all? I doubt it. They're campaigning under, we're going to put up articles of impeachment for Joe Biden. That stuff's not going to happen. We hear this all they were going to call Bush a war criminal. Nancy Pelosi was going to, declare George Bush to be a war criminal, and he probably was. But, they don't do anything. They're all buddy for the most part.
Well, have you seen the movie? Have you seen the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
No.
Jimmy Stewart. It was made back in the 1940s. And it's pretty incredible. You should watch it. It's really fascinating to see. It really adds Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart. Okay. I was gonna say, come on.
Yes. But I have not. Yeah, no, I haven't.
It's really good, and it's the same story. It's about corrupt politicians. This young guy who goes in with his tail on fire, he's going to change Washington. He's going to do this, and this, and he runs into a wall of corrupt politicians who are bought and paid for. I think it was by the banks. It may have been even pharmaceutical companies, but I think it was the banks. And it just shows you this is back in the 1940s. Things don't change.
Yes, that's changing also. Let me ask you this. I was reading some debates on this topic, and I'm curious your thoughts. So people were saying elections really, elections don't matter. Stop putting your faith in these people, right? But then we have something like Roe v. Wade, which was overturned here in the U.S. So whether you look at whatever lens you want to look at it through, it can't be a bad thing, right? I mean, I don't see how it's a bad thing, but I heard an opposing argument say they do this, and I'm curious your thoughts on this aspect here. They do this just to kind of throw you a bone to make you think that elections do have consequences. These people, maybe A.B. Coney Barrett, these right-wing, they don't really care about Roe v. They don't care about these things. They're doing it as part of a greater interest. They don't run the government. The president, they don't have any power. They're these big families, I don't know, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, or whatever. They have all to say. Do you think that there are good intended people in very high offices, maybe not local elections, but in very high offices that really do intend to do well? Or do you think that this is all part of a stage act?
I mean, judges, I don't know, but in terms of politicians, I think 99.9% of them are sociopaths. I think they are. I think you have to be. I think to get that high in politics, you have to be absolutely corrupt to the bone. And I think that's just, yes. But that's the issue with our quote unquote democracy. I mean, democracy that's kind of worshipped in America. It is the way it is because the people have a vote. It's like
the Constitution. Yeah.
It's like, well, I mean, the Constitution, like the American Constitution, has some good things in it, but not everything. And I mean, and it's like, they say, okay, these great judges that Trump appointed, and they're constitutionalists, and then you know what? They reject Roe versus Wade, but their reasoning for it is really baffling. It's just like they're not saying that the person, the baby has a right to life. as is given in the Constitution. They're just like,
Right.
well, it doesn't give the federal government doesn't have the authority.
Over the 10th Amendment. Yes.
Talk about a cop out. Talk about a bunch of
Yeah.
wussy little babies who just they don't want to actually rule on anything that is moral. And until we ever have any judges or any politicians who actually use morality or the Catholic Church to rule on anything, then in the end, you're never going to have anything good come from it. Now, I'm not saying not to vote. I am actually in the opinion that it is better to vote. And I know that is how, the CMRI in general believes, Bishop Pavrunas believes that you should vote in order to keep out the worse evil, the greater evil. I agree with that. But the older I get, the more disenchanted I am with democracy, with America. I mean, I love America. I love what America should be. I love Americans, but there's so much of what our country is and is built on that's trash. And people need to wake up to that and realize they can be patriots and not have to love everything about America.
Right. There was a huge Twitter debate maybe a couple years ago now, but I remember this, and it was a lot of people in Europe, so England, France, Portugal, all those countries that are really their essence is Catholic, right? These countries are thoroughly at their core Catholic, but not anymore at all. And you can say the U.S. is founded on Masonic Protestant principles, whatever. But I think the distinction, you made this as well, the American people, regardless of our foundation, America doesn't have the essence of, say, Catholic France or Spain or whatever. There's no way, of course not.
Got more trad Catholics than anywhere in the world.
That's the point that I was going to make is there's so many people here who are devout Catholics. I mean, you want to find, I don't know, what kind of route to go with this, but the Latin Mass, whether it be said by the Society or even, I don't know, just to throw out there, the Fraternity or the Institute, the numbers are huge. And I do think these people in them, they do want to be faithful Catholics. And I think it was like there's 671 Latin Masses, valid or not, what have you here, but said in the US every Sunday. The next highest number is like, I don't know, 100. Like America totally runs the map with this. And so I think a lot of the people here in this country have a great devotion to Our Lady. They have, I have been surrounded by very, very large crowds praying the rosary, being devoted to the St. Michael prayer, being devoted to fasting and penance. And so we are a huge traditional Catholic population here. That can't be denied, regardless of what our essence is. And I think even looking at some of the numbers, I think America was well on her way to being a Catholic country before the council. I think you look at images of Chicago, cities runs by Democrats, but
they had rosary processions. They had rosary processions with, I think, what was it, 75,000 people in a stadium. Can you imagine that for a rosary procession in 1955? Right. I think, unbelievable.
Yeah, there were rosary processions. I saw Palm Sunday processions. I saw Easter vigils. Just huge numbers that massive. And the council has really sucked the faith out of everyone in the church. Cannot harm you, wink, wink. But America will forever have her foundation as being what it was. But today, I think there are a lot of good Catholics who want to shape the culture. Very high. I can't really, I don't have numbers in front of me, but I would say, compared to the rest of the world, especially say Catholic France or Spain or whatever, the faith in those countries is quite low. Ireland, for example, right? 100%. America does pretty well.
Well, and I think that the one gripe I have, you're totally right, and I think it bugs me. Trust me, I've had many arguments with Europeans about this. Who, they hold their noses up and they get on their high horse and our country is founded on Catholic principles. Like, shut up! I mean,
you're all atheists.
It's so true. It's like, yeah, and how many problems have you caused for the church in the last 100, 200 years? So it really is, and that really is an argument I've had many times. And again, America's not perfect. My gripe with Americans is to understand what is good and what is bad about America. Liberalism, Americanism were practically condemned by Pope Leo XIII back in the late 1800s. Yes. They are not good. The form of government is not good. It is actually, again, it's at least frowned upon by Rome, by the Vatican, by the church. So we got to stop just pretending like, oh, we've got this all figured out and like democracy and the American way is the only way. That's wrong. Now, American people, as you said, their traditionalism, their patriotism, there are some beautiful, beautiful things about Americans. They just need to realize that, what is that? What are the good things about us? And again, if a country is not run hand in hand with the Catholic Church, then you are always on the wrong path. Always.
Right. And it's funny you were saying that too, because you think like they rub their noses, right? And then like, who have you put in office? Macron in France? Like, who
again?
Are you putting in?
Oh,
like, yeah, right. Like, okay, good for you over there.
I'd have British people when Trump was elected, they come up to me and pat me on the shoulder and they, oh, good job, mate. Oh, you did such a brilliant job electing that tyrant over there. And it's like, and then like and then like what?
Yeah, Tony Blair.
2 months later, they had the referendum to leave the EU. That was beautiful. How are you feeling about that now? Huh? Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah,
Schadenfreude.
Yeah,
that was
I right. Americans, they get a lot of hate, and I think it's really unwarranted. I don't want to go into too much detail, but we here in the U.S. We had a visitor from Germany, the Deutschland, and it was her first time in the U.S. and I spent some time. I took her around. She came for work, but she spent time with each of us, and I took her. We got breakfast, or we just drove around and toured a little bit, and I asked her, what are some of the things that surprise you? Like, what is actually different about America than what you were taught or heard, or the typical stereotype in Germany or what have you? And she said first, this was a joke, but it's weird to see all the signs in miles per hour. She's like, we're driving in the road and I see like 45 or 60 miles per hour, and she's like, that's like, I can't conceptualize what that means. What that means. But she's like, how incredibly helpful Americans were shocked her. She had her flight left. It went from Germany to, I think, might have been Ireland, and then to Boston. And there were some problems with communication and all that. And she was like, everybody at the airport and whatnot was so helpful. She was like, they saw I was having trouble, and they, like, they stopped me. Are you okay? Do you need help? Do you need anything? Like, did you eat? Did you have food? Did you have lunch? She was like that. She was like, it almost made me emotional, because like in Germany, she's like, people don't care. Nobody would say anything.
No.
So you should be like, whatever, figure it out yourself. She's like, so the compassion of Americans was very much shocking to her. She was like, because in Europe there is that, the Americans are, have X, Y, and Z said about them, but she's like, totally opposite of what we're told over here. And this is in the Northeast. These are bluish, areas here. Imagine if she went to the South, some Southern hospitality, or out west, or, Midwest, or somewhere out there. So very different. But I wish a lot of they think we eat Wendy's all day and stuff. I got her this like really nice. Some people do. We got this really nice breakfast, and it was really well put out and excellent quality food. And she's like, wow, we think that like, Americans, get McDonald's in their cars, like, and there is that stereotype, which I get it, but it's not always the case. And what this has to do with the red wave in November, I'm not sure.
That's all right. We got on a chat, but it's a good point that I think sometimes I really do think that sometimes Europeans don't like us because they ain't us. I think that's and I mean, Americans do control society around the world. That's just a fact. I mean, and I'm not saying that's good. They control culture. And that's a terrible thing, honestly, in a lot of ways, because the culture is a lot of it streams from Hollywood and from the music industry.
Sadly.
And that's bad. And that's terrible. But again, that's what we should realize. Americans need to realize we do have this, this step above everybody else. People look to us, and what we can provide and what we can do, we've shown through world wars, and we've shown through catastrophes, and we've shown how great we can be. Let's not show them Hollywood, for goodness sake. Let's understand what is terrible about our country and try to rid ourselves of it. And we have to do that one person at a time, and saying, I will not give my money to Hollywood, which is a detriment to all of mankind. Hollywood and the music industry as a whole are leading souls to hell around the world, and people don't take that seriously enough. That's maybe we'll talk about that next week. I'm going to have a series. I'm having a series starting with Intro Ebo. Intro Ebo is going to come on for a series starting hopefully in the next weeks.
Oh, nice.
Talking about occultism in media, occultism in schools, occultism, and how occultism has kind of taken hold of modern society. Creepy, disturbing, but true. Matt, I think we'll wrap up there. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, as always, for coming on. I really enjoy these shows. I hope everyone else does too, even if we're just kind of rambling, talking about whatever we want to, kind of just
about speed limit signs.
Exactly. But if anyone does enjoy this show, please like, share, subscribe, comment. Tell us your feelings. How do you feel about the November elections? How do you feel about voting? That is a very complicated and debatable topic. Tell us in the comments on YouTube. That's the best for us, because then we will get higher algorithms on the YouTube. Their robot brains, they will kick us to the top if we get comments. So feel free to let us know how you feel, and let us know how you feel about homeschooling, or what were your experiences in the public schools, etc. Also comment on Matt's conversation, or his topic about the R&R, etc. A lot of good stuff this week. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next week, Matt, God bless.
Make the world Catholic again.